There's a reason the opening chords of that unmistakable piano tune instantly transport so many people to a time, a place, and a feeling. A reason why decades after it first aired, Cheers still commands such a deep, enduring reverence in the world of sitcoms. It wasn't flashy. It didn't rely on high-concept premises or larger-than-life stakes. Instead, it chose the most ordinary, familiar place imaginable, a neighborhood bar, and turned it into something extraordinary. It made Cheers not just a setting, but a symbol of comfort, community, and a kind of grounded storytelling that feels increasingly rare. What made Cheers so brilliant, and still so great, is how effortlessly it turned the everyday into the unforgettable. The entire show largely took place within the four walls of that dimly lit bar in Boston, and yet it never felt confined. Week after week, it invited viewers back into its world like regulars returning to their favorite stool, beer in hand, knowing that whatever happened in the outside world, this was a place where things made sense, or at least could be laughed at. There was something magical in its simplicity, in the way the bar seemed to absorb everyone's problems, quirks, aspirations, and fears, and give back laughter in return. But it wasn't just the setting that mattered. It was the philosophy behind it. Cheers made an art form out of the idea that people from wildly different walks of life could come together, not because they agreed on everything, but because they showed up. They kept coming back, and in doing so, they built something resembling a family, or at the very least, a place where they were seen and heard. In an era of fast-paced living and disconnected routines, that kind of loyalty, both in the characters and in the viewers, feels sacred. The writing, crisp and layered, operated on two frequencies at once. It gave you the laugh-out-loud moments you expected from a top-tier sitcom, but also rewarded you for paying attention. Beneath the gags and clever wordplay was a deeply human undercurrent. Stories about aging, disappointment, unfulfilled dreams, the changing tides of American culture, and the eternal search for purpose. Cheers didn't shout about its wisdom. It whispered it, slipped it between the jokes, let it simmer just beneath the surface of a conversation over a pint. You didn't always realize you were being moved until the credits rolled and you found yourself smiling through a lump in your throat. And oh, the rhythm of the show. It had this steady, confident heartbeat. You knew the pace, you knew the vibe, you could anticipate the setups and still be surprised by the punchlines. It was a masterclass in timing, not just comedic timing, but emotional timing. Cheers knew when to hold a moment, when to let it breathe, when to let the silence speak. It trusted its audience. It didn't feel the need to explain every joke or overplay every emotion. It was content to let the scene be what it was, to let the characters reveal themselves gradually, like real people do. Part of what makes Cheers so endlessly rewatchable is how every episode feels like a slice of something real. Not because it mimicked reality perfectly, but because it reflected how we wish reality could be. A place where you could walk through the door and be welcomed, where your flaws didn't define you, where people might tease you mercilessly but would also back you up without hesitation. It created a world where connection was possible, even inevitable. And that's why it still works, even now, when so many shows try to go bigger, faster, louder. Cheers knew the real magic was in going deeper. And let's not forget how influential Cheers was, not in a loud, self-congratulatory way, but in how it quietly raised the bar for sitcoms across the board. It proved that you didn't need a flashy hook or a constantly rotating cast of characters to keep things interesting. What you needed was heart. You needed characters who felt lived in, dialogue that sparkled, and a setting that meant something. Countless shows have tried to replicate the alchemy of Cheers, but few have matched it, because it wasn't about the bar. It was about the feeling the bar gave you. It was about coming back again and again and realizing you'd missed it more than you thought. There's something else about Cheers that has made it endure, and it's not just the bar, the banter, or even the sense of belonging. It's the way the show captured time itself. Watch Cheers long enough, and you feel the years pass. You feel the seasons change, not because the weather shifts or the wardrobe updates, but because the conversations evolve. The relationships deepen, and the laughter carries a new kind of weight. It was never about sprinting toward dramatic conclusions. It was about being there through it all, day after day, drink after drink, story after story. You began to notice how effortlessly Cheers let life happen. Not in big sweeping arcs, but in the way a character might suddenly reflect on growing older, or how a background regular might get one brilliant moment of wisdom. The bar functioned like a living organism. It listened, it remembered, it welcomed you when you were up, and it didn't flinch when you were down. That emotional consistency, that quiet reliability, is one of the most underrated achievements in sitcom history. There was also an elegance to how Cheers balanced old-school sensibility with subversive undertones. It respected tradition but wasn't afraid to poke at it. It was intelligent without ever being smug, warm without being saccharine. And that mix, the familiar with the unexpected, gave it a rare texture. You'd think you knew where a conversation was headed, and then suddenly it would veer, revealing something sharper, something more thoughtful than you anticipated. And that twist wouldn't demand your attention, it would earn it. The show also understood the power of routine, not just for the characters, but for us. There was comfort in the rhythm of it all, in the nightly gathering of familiar faces, in the clink of glasses, the thud of a beer mug on the bar, the wry punch of a one-liner from across the room. These weren't just characters living in a sitcom universe. They were part of a ritual we all shared. Sitting down for Cheers felt like joining a group therapy session disguised as a comedy, where laughter softened life's sharper edges. It also didn't shy away from life's hard truths, that you can love a place and still feel stuck there, that you can laugh all night and still go home alone, that you can be the smartest person in the room and still not have your act together. Cheers allowed characters to carry their contradictions without demanding they be resolved. And in doing so, it gave the audience permission to sit with their own unresolved selves. It was revolutionary in its realism, even as it maintained the structure of a traditional sitcom. The bar wasn't a gimmick. It was a metaphor, a gathering point, a container for human complexity, filtered through the gentle haze of beer foam and barstool wisdom. Everyone who walked through the door brought something different, perspectives, dreams, damage, and yet they shared a space that made room for all of it. There was no forced harmony, no artificial lessons tied up in a bow. Instead, there was understanding, sarcastic, messy, genuine understanding. That's the real beauty of it. Cheers wasn't afraid to slow down, to let moments breathe. It knew that silence could be just as powerful as a punchline, that a look could say more than a paragraph. That's something most modern sitcoms have lost, the confidence to pause. But Cheers had it. It trusted that the audience would stay, would listen, would feel. And we did. The show has become, over the years, a kind of time capsule, a snapshot of America before the internet took over, before social media, before binge culture. And yet it never feels dated. The hairstyles and clothes may mark the era, but the themes, the loneliness, the need for community, the longing to be understood are timeless. The stories feel like they could happen today, because they do. They're happening all around us, in coffee shops, in dive bars, in break rooms, wherever people gather to talk, to vent, to belong. And that's the quiet genius of Cheers, its ability to feel personal, no matter who you are or where you're from. It doesn't matter if you've never set foot in a Boston bar or if you've never tossed back a beer in your life. Cheers isn't about alcohol, it's about connection. The bar is just a stage, and on it unfolds the raw, unfiltered comedy of being human. There's no pretension, no high-concept premise, just people, facing the daily grind, showing up for each other, and doing it with wit and warmth. What's so magnetic about the show is that it understood the true power of small moments. It didn't rely on spectacle or bombshell twists. Instead, it trusted the subtle power of a knowing glance, the comic timing of a perfectly placed pause, or the simple familiarity of walking into the same room and seeing the same faces. It's a show that trusted the slow burn, that didn't try to outdo itself with every episode, but instead built a mosaic of quiet emotional truths that grew deeper over time. There's something truly poetic about how Cheers managed to feel fresh for over a decade without chasing trends. While other sitcoms came and went, pivoted to keep up with the times, or relied on increasingly elaborate antics, Cheers stayed true to its core. It didn't need reinvention. It thrived on authenticity. Even as it evolved, it remained rooted in what mattered most: good writing, sharp dialogue, and a deep understanding of what makes people tick. The show trusted its setting and characters to carry the weight of the story, and that trust paid off in gold. And let's not forget the humor. The laughter in Cheers wasn't just a distraction. It was a bridge. It made space for deeper things to land. The jokes were clever, fast, sometimes dry, sometimes delightfully absurd, but they were never mean. Cheers had this rare talent for poking fun at life's disappointments without becoming cynical. It laughed at human failings without diminishing human dignity. And that's a balancing act most shows still struggle to master. At its best, Cheers operated like a symphony. Each voice, each beat, each moment served the larger piece. Even background characters felt like they mattered, like they were part of the ecosystem. Everyone had a place. And for viewers, that idea, that everyone had a place, even the misfits and the mess-ups, was both comforting and radical. Because who hasn't felt, at one point or another, like they just want to be part of something, to be recognized, to walk into a room and hear someone call their name? That famous theme song wasn't just catchy, it was prophetic. Where everybody knows your name wasn't just a lyric, it was a promise, a kind of emotional contract the show made with its viewers. Come here, it said. Sit down, you'll be seen, you'll be heard, you'll laugh, maybe cry, and when it's over, you'll feel better than when you arrived. And somehow, Cheers fulfilled that promise week after week, year after year. It's not just nostalgia that makes people go back to Cheers. It's recognition. We see ourselves in the setting, in the rhythms, in the faces. We remember that even in a world spinning faster and faster, there was once a show that was content to linger in the small things. That believed human connection, with all its mess and glory, was enough to build greatness on. As we raise a final glass to Cheers, it's worth remembering that the show's brilliance didn't come from reinventing the wheel, it came from perfecting it. It took a simple premise, the kind that could have easily faded into obscurity, and crafted something enduring, something iconic. A show not just about a bar, but about what happens when you create a space where people are free to be themselves. A place where flaws are forgiven, quirks are celebrated, and everybody truly knows your name. When Cheers ended in 1993, after 11 remarkable seasons, it wasn't just the closing of a series, it felt like the closing of a chapter in television history. The final episode wasn't dramatic for the sake of drama, it was human, earnest, familiar. Sam, standing behind the bar, giving one last glance to the empty room before shutting off the lights, was the perfect goodbye. Not flashy, not loud, just honest, because Cheers always knew when to speak up and when to be still. And that's why it lasts. That's why decades later, people still discover it and fall in love. That's why it doesn't feel dated, despite being wrapped in the style of the 80s and 90s. Because Cheers wasn't about an era. It was about people, about life. And life doesn't change all that much. We still seek out spaces where we're welcomed. We still need people who listen. We still laugh at ourselves, and we still want to belong. In an age of endless content and digital disconnection, Cheers reminds us of something refreshingly analog, that the deepest joys often come from the simplest places. A conversation, a smile, a worn-in chair, a familiar voice calling you by name. It wasn't just a sitcom, it was a sanctuary, a weekly ritual, a gathering place not just for the characters on screen, but for us, the viewers. And like the best places in life, it leaves behind not just memories, but a feeling, a warmth that lingers, a nostalgia that doesn't fade. So why is Cheers still considered one of the greatest sitcoms of all time? Because it earned that place quietly, patiently, sincerely, and because it never tried to be anything other than what it was, a home. To Cheers, the little bar that made the whole world feel like it belonged.